Hello, Malcolm. I'm so excited to be with you today because we're going to be talking about Johannesburg coming to a city near you. Why? Because it is crumbling, but crumbling in very interesting ways, in which not only is it falling apart, but it has these protected walled gardens where things are actually really nice. And we need to expect this to happen a lot more in the future. But let's give some context. The G20 summit is being held in Johannesburg this month, which is putting it back in the news as the city scrambles to not humiliate itself when big deal people come to visit. So that's why like a lot of people are now talking about how crappy it is, when I mean it always has had problems. But the Wall Street Journal recently did this hilarious piece on it, and we'll share the highlights. There's some great pictures from it. And there's also this ironic side note, which I think is really wonderful, that the summit, the G20 summit that's happening this month, the theme is solidarity, equality, sustainability. And it's focused on inclusive economic growth, food security, and technology-driven sustainable development. And this is in Johannesburg.
and to give an idea, can you talk about some of the signs for crime spots and stuff like that?
Yeah, I will show you. Okay. Just to give you a teaser, here is a sign that you can now find in Johannesburg. For those who are just listening, it's at a road sign. It's just a big red dot, and it says "Crime Hotspot." So they're not trying to like stop crime.
What they've done is, and I sent you an article on this, the policing system in Johannesburg has gone to just sort of labeling parts of the city where you are likely to have certain types of crime committed, and then tell you what crime is likely to be committed to you. Like carjackings frequent here. And then the cops are intentionally avoiding these areas.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, there's going to be crime here. Guess we better stay away from it. Don't want to get hurt, Like this is the police. This is just kind of how things have gotten.
I want to stand and like jack up cars in these areas. Just point to the sign, be like, look, it's common here, okay?
No, like really though. I feel like at this point you kind of have impunity if you're carjacking in the area. You're like, listen, you were warned, sir. Like. What did you expect?
It's like a deer crossing or something.
Yeah, like, well, okay, so this is the crosswalk. You cross in the crosswalk. This is the carjacking zone. You carjack.
This is the carjacking zone.
This really is a great time to remind people that Johannesburg, like I said, represents the future. So what we're going to do is dive into some more detail on the state of Johannesburg, which has some fascinating sci-fi dystopian vibes. We're also going to talk about how we're seeing some of this model go to places outside Johannesburg. So first, the degradation.
So you get to live in a sci-fi dystopia if you live in Johannesburg now. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to live in a sci-fi dystopia? There's if you just look on X, like sort of top posts about Johannesburg. Here's an example of just sort of like a video of the city. Just it's crappy. It looks like a third world country. It doesn't look very good. There's the famous Ponte Tower. You've heard of this one. It's that big circular tower that for a long time was just taken over by gangs.
And then what happened to it?
So actually it has been reclaimed. There's this great YouTube short though I'm going to send to you where there's this guy like very enthusiastically standing in the center of the tower being like, this is where the dead bodies were dumped.
And this is where all the dead bodies were and all the trash.
It piled up 13 stories high.
Because people literally would throw their trash into the center of this tower. But yeah, it has actually since been reclaimed, and it now has multiple shops and people actually live in there, but it still looks kind of dystopian and ruined. And then of course you and I actually went to Johannesburg in 2018. We toured the Soweto Township, which is one of the not nice areas. I'm just going to send you some of the photos that we took there, sort of showing the state. These are very much shanties. We visited.
So what she's mentioning is that Simone and I did a tour of one of the townships, like one of the shanty towns in Johannesburg.
Yeah, I actually included one photo of me when we were in the school we visited, just for proof that we were actually there. Me like showing the kids the photos. But like you can see there's a photo of like the school lunches that the kids were served there. Like this is not a nice place to go to. I mean, like the kids actually were amazing. The teachers were fantastic. Like the actual community that we interacted with when we went there, all the people are great, but the infrastructure is terrible. There are constant power outages. There are constant water outages. I don't know to what extent people are experiencing food insecurity, but the school lunches that I've literally included
they're
a picture
just
of.
a white mush.
It's white mush of some sort. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's very much like Oliver Twist. I want some more porridge, kind of.
Yeah,
that's the mood we're going for here. And I also shared some signs that were on just like a random wall that we walked by. That for the men, there's penis enlargement, and then for the women, there's abortion. I think it says same day, pain free, with a number to call. Just so everyone
I love it for men and women. Oh my God, imagine going for like an abortion that you just saw as like a sign on a wall in Johannesburg.
Yeah, I feel like this is the Johannesburg version of Hims and Hers vitamins. I'm sure you've seen like the extensive ad campaigns for Hims.
I love that you took a picture of this. And they're all over the wall too, right?
Yeah, like, it's just like get what you need, gender specific. And then what really prompted me to dive back into this was just this fantastic Wall Street Journal piece called "Welcome to Johannesburg. This is what it looks like when a city gives up." Subtitle: Tourists are dumbfounded by the many signs of apathy in South African city, the Josie Jacuzzi pothole.
When it comes to service delivery, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. God, where's the horse?
Liters and liters of water a day are gushing out. And it's been like this for 2 years.
I mean, a Porsche went in there last weekend.
So what it tells you is that somebody is not doing their job.
Join us this Sunday as we dive into the depths of the Josie Jacuzzi.
I want to read the beginning of the article to you because it's just so good and it says it all, but I'm also going to send you some highlight photos.
By the way, you're wondering what the TFR of South Africa is these days? It's 2.2.
I mean, that's pretty good.
They're almost below replacement right now.
Yeah, I mean, but it's
those
poverty.
Abortion doctors must be good,
I mean, that they're handling it.
And I wouldn't expect to still be fertile after one of those roadside penis enlargement surgeries.
I know, seriously, that's probably not helping with the fertility. Those are both basically probably two forms of curtailing the population. So the Wall Street Journal article: signs tell you what crime you're most likely to fall victim to at highway exits and intersections. Beware of hijacking hotspot or smash and grab hotspot. Homeless people routinely direct traffic when the stoplights don't work. Minibus taxis that ferry workers around the city often drive on the wrong side of the road to avoid rush hour traffic. I mean, sometimes I wish taxis would do that. Johannesburg, South Africa's biggest metropolis, markets itself as a world-class African city. It's home to some of the continent's biggest companies and its largest stock exchange. But private firms have gradually taken over public services, from security to healthcare to mail delivery. Insurance companies fix potholes and sponsor fire brigades to reduce claims. Now, this is really important, that last sentence. Mm-hmm. This is what we need to expect in the future. And this is why Johannesburg is different. Okay. One thing I want to highlight is that while I just shared a bunch of photos of like Soweto Township that we saw, we've been in other places that are not very wealthy, and they don't feel that different. Like one of the more popular complaints about people in Johannesburg is that people will you'll be sitting at a restaurant or on a street and someone will just grab your phone and steal it from you. That happened to me in Peru.
Yeah, but the thing you didn't really dwell on the Soweto Jacuzzi.
We're going to get to that in the article. But the point I want to add, though, is what makes... So we've seen basically the bad neighborhoods in Johannesburg didn't feel too different to me from bad neighborhoods in the United States and bad neighborhoods in Peru and other countries we've been to. What is different about Johannesburg, and this is very important, is that they have experienced this for so long and so systemically that private industry and private individuals are starting to step in where the government is failing because now it's so expected. The government is so corrupt that people are like, well, I'm just not going to depend on it anymore. So literally that insurance companies are fixing potholes because they're just not getting fixed. They're sponsoring fire brigades to reduce claims, to save money, and that homeless people are directing traffic. I think this is what we're ultimately going to see more of in the rest of the world. And people need to be thinking about this when they decide where they want to live, what companies they want to deal with, and when they can go somewhere where they can expect private individuals and private industry to step in, where governments will fail. Because where you don't want to be is where you move somewhere where government fails and nobody steps in. Like you're just literally written off entirely, because that is going to happen in many places as well. So I'll go back to the Wall Street Journal article. It's all become a bit embarrassing for the South African government, which is about to set host to the G20 summit meeting of heads of state in November. In March, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa chided Johannesburg officials for what he claimed as not a pleasing environment and told them to address the slew of issues ahead of the meeting. City of Joburg is as ready as it ever will be for the G20 summit, said a spokeswoman for Johannesburg, Mayor Dada Moreiro. Moreiro, the city's 9th mayor in 10 years, in May, launched a task force dubbed the Bomb Squad to address service delivery issues in various neighborhoods. Some of the team's achievements, according to Moreiro's spokeswoman, the resolution of a 15-day water outage, 15 days without water. There are water outages all the time in Lima, Peru, too, where we live, but 15 days is next level. Oof. The restoration of power to 1,000 households within 1 day of a substation failure. 1,000 households, not even a storm. And the...
Octavian, we will find the power cord when we're done recording, okay? Can you say hi to the fans?
Hi.
What do you know about Africa, Octavian?
I know about Africa that they have, like, that the president, like, have a real vehicle and a decoy.
That nothing to do with Africa. Nothing to do with Africa.
I don't know.
Ow. Okay, Octavian, go back downstairs, and I will come and get you if you can leave me alone for a little bit.
And the rectification of a 7-year-long water blockage for 24 hours, or in 24 hours. So a 7-year-long water blockage. These are just they're issues that have clearly been left behind by the government.
Just nobody cares. Yeah. When you get this, well, because they see their job as collecting taxes and spending them on themselves and their cronies, not on actually doing the job of governing.
Yeah. And then there's the Josie Jacuzzi. So in August, a popular investigative journalism show ran a segment on the Josie Jacuzzi pothole in the Randburg area of Johannesburg. The 6-foot deep pothole had been filling with water for years, even causing low water pressure in nearby houses. There's this great news segment that I shared with you. I'll send you a link again if you want to include it in the video. Where like literally the journalist gets in like scuba gear and like an inner tube and just like jumps in. It's just like ha ha ha. It's so bad. There's also
going to people's houses.
Yeah, they're nicknaming the potholes. There's another pothole that's called Kenny's Canyon after a local politician, and it was dug by Johannesburg Water as it searched for a leak. Drainage pipes, fire cables, and piles of sand were left blocking a lane of traffic for more than a year, while the 26-foot deep hole filled with water. In July, South Africa's biggest opposition party held a birthday party with cake for its 1-year anniversary. In February, a borehole that was being drilled on private property in the Killamurray suburb went straight into a tunnel used for the Gautrain, a 50-mile commuter rail system that operates partly above ground and partly underground. The tunnel flooded with water and soil, interrupting service for more than a week. Quote, think of it as a scenic surface route, a chance to see Johannesburg for a change, Gautrain said in a statement after the mishap. Quote, you may discover a new favorite coffee shop or a massive pothole. It's Johannesburg after all.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing. Note that the reason why that particular train was shut down was because someone was digging a borehole in a suburban neighborhood. The reason why they were doing that is because the water gets shut off for 15 days at a time. And borehole water is actually
to reach well water.
Yeah, exactly. Is that they were just trying to get basically water autonomy because they couldn't depend on the city. And they just broke more of the city in doing that.
What, does it make you feel better that we have well water at our house?
Yeah. And actually, that's one of the things I want to point to. Like, where are you getting your water? Do you have backup power? Like, all these sorts of things are things that families need to be increasingly thinking about as we move toward demographic collapse. And as in general, cities, and especially American suburban cities, reach a point where they increasingly experience cascading bankruptcy. And we're going to talk about that next.
Yeah, well, and this is all downstream of just like extreme wokeism.
Yes and no. It's a combination of things.
No, so the type of bureaucracy and corruption we explicitly see in South Africa.
Oh, that yes, that's all apartheid based. Yes, yeah,
yeah, and I think that it is in structure very similar to the way that many progressives in the United States, like look at Mondami, right? Like New York is a hellscape right now, right? Like all the businesses are moving out. It's empty everywhere you go. The crime is constant.
Well, same with California. If they institute that billionaire tax, that one time like 5% of your total wealth, unearned included tax or whatever, to like just pay off California's debt, like that, they're just going to leave.
Yeah, but the point being is that with the Mondami situation, New York knows how bad it is already. And yet they're still voting on a guy like this who will only make every one of their pre-existing problems worse.
Well, I partially think when it comes to Mamdani that he's the woke or progressive version of Trump, where it's clear from polling and coverage and interviews as well that a lot of the people who are voting for him don't actually think that he's going to make things better. In fact, I think they believe he's going to make things worse. But they also just want to like take a hammer to New York and just bust it up because they're just so angry about everything. It's very much the same way that people wanted to vote Trump in to drain the swamp and just break Washington, D.C. because they just freaking hated it. So I think that's part of what's going on. There's one more thing, though, that I wanted to point out that's just so great and just a wonderful absurdist detail about Johannesburg and how bad it is, and also kind of what we should be expecting in other cities in the future. Sometimes citizens, I'm reading from the Wall Street Journal article again. Sometimes citizens clap back. In 2013, the provincial government that encompasses Johannesburg implemented an electronic toll system on major highways to recoup costs on cities associated with expanding roads for the 2010 Soccer World Cup. Since then, most of the city's residents refused to pay, ignoring invoices and threats of legal action. Alcindor Condi, 66, works in construction and says he has never paid an e-toll. He estimates he owes around $3,000, but stopped getting bills years ago, quote, because the postal system doesn't work.
Wait, so what is this e-toll for? It's a bill for...
It's toll roads. There are toll roads in Johannesburg, and the citizens have just decided to not pay them, and they don't even receive the bill because the postal system doesn't work. Quote, if they prosecuted me, they would have to prosecute the tens of thousands of others in courts, and they couldn't handle it. Like, the courts literally couldn't help them prosecute all of the unpaid bill holders because the courts don't work. So the roads don't work. They tried to fix them by charging people tolls. The people don't pay the tolls. And partially the bills aren't even getting to them because the mail doesn't work. And even if they tried to take the people to court because they're not paying the toll road bills to fix the roads that aren't working, that they couldn't because the courts don't work. So
yes. And I think when people think that this is, again, something that can't happen by you, it absolutely can. We are seeing our cities degrade, and as they degrade, the voters are not course correcting. They are going more woke. That's why I brought up Mondami, right? Like, well, and
I mean, you even see this actually. I mean, like, this is something that gets covered a lot around the world, and especially increasingly, speaking of Mamdani in New York, with criminals, for example, not being prosecuted properly for things like shoplifting. And this is something that you highlighted a little bit earlier, the issue with police in South Africa. You sent me a Conversations with Tyler podcast episode with Tyler Cowan, in which he interviews the author Johnny Steinberg, who spent around 350 hours writing around with South African police between 2004 and 2007. So quite a long time ago, and things are much worse now. Basically, he shares in this interview that there was only policing with consent. Police would only go basically when they were called. So most of the things that they actually were looking at while on their shifts or whatever were domestic violence cases where people asked them to come. Though even in these cases, it's very normalized to pay police to investigate crimes when you actually want help. So you basically have to bribe police to investigate a crime.
Yeah.
So you can either include a clip, but basically Cowan was like, your work in the police in South Africa, if there were 2 policemen in a township in South Africa, how large is the crowd they can successfully confront and still manage to handle? Steinberg, it depends very much on the circumstances, where they are, and the time of day. But if it's a Saturday night, and if there are 10 to 20 people, and they're young, those 2 cops don't want to be there. They'll make sure they're not. Cowan, so they just don't even show up and take the call. Steinberg, yeah, when I was riding around with them, It was really amusing. They have an equivalent of the CompStat system, which told them where the hotspots were, which was where they had to police. And they'd make absolutely sure to do the opposite and not be in the hotspots, because if there were only 2 of them, they were not sure that they could control people. So this is the state, again, of Johannesburg.
Well, do you know how bad this is going to be in parts of Europe where cops don't even have guns?
Yeah, where they just have their fabulous batons, like in the UK. I would point out, though, one thing that they discussed briefly in this Conversations with Tyler interview is, okay, well, are people in Johannesburg afraid of the police, right? Like, you have to bribe the police to get them to do something, to get them to help you, where you also bribe police a lot, very classically, is in Mexico. But also in Mexico, the police are like actively scary. Like, you're really worried that the police are going to like hurt you. And basically the guy being interviewed, Steinberg, was like, like they'll rough you up and stuff, but people aren't scared of the police like they are in Mexico. And I just want to point out that, like, Johannesburg isn't worse than rough parts of Mexico, than rough parts of Peru, than rough parts of any country with somewhat similar per capita GDP. And Peru and Johannesburg basically have the same
I would note
GDP
that it
per
is
capita.
worse in a way that you're not really discussing here, which is to say, and I always note that this is something you have to be careful about, is to assume that a developed country that is collapsing is going to be at an equivalent level of quality of life to a country with an equal GDP that is developing. And that just isn't the case.
And that's true. But yeah, Johannesburg, you go and then you go again in 10 years and it's worse. Peru, every time we went, and we loved this, there'd be some new construction. There'd be something new that was built, something that was improved, something that was fixed, a new bridge, a new road. You're right. And it's
that's the bigger issue is the way that utilities collapse. When we were in Peru, I don't think we had a single power outage the entire time we were there.
Yes, we did. In fact, just the last time that I was in Peru, in the nicest neighborhood, there was a power outage, and I was in the nicest hotel of the nicest neighborhood. We had water outages and we had power outages, and you're just conveniently forgetting.
No, I if we had them, it couldn't have been more than once a month.
Yeah, it wasn't frequent. It wasn't that frequent. And the water outages, you would typically receive a warning about them.
Yeah. So how long? So sorry, what are you considering? Was it like one power outage every like?
It would often be like for 12 hours in a day, and in Johannesburg it's like 15 days. So obviously it's way worse.
Yeah, but they were rare enough that it never inconvenienced me in a meaningful way.
It inconvenienced me because I wanted to take my shower and I couldn't take my shower, and I'm on a schedule. And you're like, well, if I have to go one day without a thing, it's not so bad. And I'm like, no, if I can't have it at 3 p.m., which is my time to take a shower or whatever, like then I freak out.
But me losing internet or power is a big thing because I spend my life online, right?
Yeah, but you would just tether to your phone and use batteries for that.
Yeah, I just tether to my phone.
That's why you don't remember it. It's very different. I agree. It's different if it's 15 days. But again, my point is, this is something that isn't unique to Johannesburg. What is unique is that Johannesburg has these walled gardens. And in Peru, we couldn't evade it. We were in the nicest neighborhood, in the nicest city in Peru, and there were still water outages. That I could be at the Marriott Hotel in Miraflores and still experience a power outage meant, something different from in Johannesburg, where you have backup power, you have borehole water, and you live in these walled communities. So I want to talk about these a little bit. And I'm going to share some examples of some of these walled estates. They have private security, they have borehole water, and they look totally different from Johannesburg. So I'm going to send some links with some of like the little like promo videos they have. Some of the more notable ones in Johannesburg are Danfem Golf Estate, and there's also Country Gardens Estate. The Danfem or Danfem Golf Estate is more old, and then the Country Gardens Estate is newer. And here's some pictures of the Country Gardens Estate houses. They're like very modern, very pretty. You would never know that these places were in Johannesburg.
In Peru, there isn't anything like this.
Exactly. You can't escape the hazards of Peru, whereas in Johannesburg you can absolutely escape
like
it.
Little suburb developments for like wealthier people that you could go to.
Yeah, but you
But
were
they
still
did-
on the main grid. They weren't these walled communities with private gardens. They didn't have like a literally like different feeling environment. Whereas
Right. And I think that this is actually, again, really telling when I'm talking about the difference between a collapsing developed economy and a developing economy.
Yeah, because those nice neighborhoods in Peru, like it's with the expectation that everything's getting better. Whereas in Johannesburg, they've declared bankruptcy. They're like, I don't know, I'm just like, this is our space colony.
Yeah, I'm cutting myself off from society.
Exactly.
But it also is due to the extent of the collapse. It's when you reach a certain level of collapse. And this is actually something that we should probably talk about or like name in our advocacy or whatever. And I'll call it just the inflection point, which is the point at which it is worth it for communities to cut themselves off from the state grid.
Yeah.
And in Peru, they haven't reached the inflection point yet because of the expectation that, well, the state grid is always getting better. The power grid is always getting better. The water supply is always getting better.
It's going to get better. Yeah.
It's always getting better. So even if it's not perfect today, and you know, you got like me with pretty high standards, I'm like, it's not perfect, but it's usable. Like I can live with this. The only reason why Simone cared is because she's autistic about like showering and stuff like that. And she can't be like, I'm just going to take a shower later in the day.
God forbid. No.
But in Johannesburg, that is why in Peru, that even when I go to and we lived in the second nicest neighborhood.
Miraflores is the nicest. What do you think? Barranco is better?
San Isidro, I believe it was called.
San Isidro was super, like more
San
residential.
Isidro is generally considered slightly nicer than Miraflores. Miraflores is like more touristy, and San Isidro is more like
residential, bougie.
But like the thing about like San Isidro isn't walled. You can walk through the center of this beautiful park in San Isidro. There's 100%, olive trees, and it's just absolutely beautiful.
And there were some gated parks that belonged just to really fancy apartment complexes, but they were always open. You could walk in, and they did not have private security.
Yeah. So there were quote unquote gated parks, but you could just walk in. Like nobody cared. We on our morning walk, because we go on a walk every morning, would always walk through the gated communities, and nobody cared. Nobody ever stopped us, which is very different from I assume these gated communities in Johannesburg, where to get into them is going to be quite a thing.
And there's also a tone thing, and I want to talk about that because it's also this bifurcation of society that we need to be talking about and getting ready for, because like you keep saying with AI, people are just going to be left behind. They're going to be sort of rendered obsolete. And you absolutely see this in Johannesburg.
It happens. When we did our video on like, when is AI actually going to start changing things? When is it actually going to change, my job or my employment or anything like that? Because we'd had fans tell us like, nothing seems to be happening yet. Nothing seems to be happening yet. And I'm like, guys,
when you notice it's happened, it's already too late. You've already been left behind. The ship has left for Mars, and you're still on Earth.
And now, we're getting things from our fans of, I was working at Amazon, and, they did that big automation thing where they replaced tons of employees with AI. And we're having like our fans who like we talk to regularly have their livelihoods replaced. And this is now, I think, hitting people like, oh, they told me this was going to happen. They told me this would change everything about my life. And, I maybe thought that I wasn't seeing it until it completely transformed my own life. I mean, it's going to be the same as this.
Yeah.
This is going to seem like something that's never going to happen until it happens to you. And then you're like, oh yeah, people were talking about this like 9 years ago or something. That weird nerdy Collins couple.
But it's also just so futuristic and dystopian, like the lifestyle inside these walled gardens. You'd think that like there's a lot of residual guilt or like concern about, the people outside or something like that, and really not. And you can kind of get a feeling for this in the Johannesburg related subreddits on Reddit, where the wealthy post about their gardens and swinging. Like one of the most active Johannesburg subreddits is just for swingers in Johannesburg.
Really?
But it's only like white people who live in these gated communities. And when you look at the posts, often it's like expats talking about what they miss, and it's mostly the thunderstorms and the jacaranda trees. Then there's some really interesting threads where people are asking for advice on, for example, moving back. And in seeing the people's posts on like giving advice to someone, for example, who's an expat from Johannesburg who moved to the UK and is thinking about going back to Johannesburg from the UK, because
No, I'm seeing this a lot too. We actually had a guest on our show, the aristocratic utensil, who's like, "Yeah, I'm moving back to South Africa. The UK is just getting too sketchy."
Yeah, that's I mean, it's a thing, and it's interesting because keep in mind, like Johannesburg, we just read about how much of a mess it is, but to these people, that is completely irrelevant to them because again, these are like off the grid, borehole, independent power, private security communities that look like paradises. Like the pictures I showed you, the links I gave you, like these are really nice.
Well, and they look like paradises in a way that nothing in Peru really does, or Lima does.
Like because actually Lima, really high quality paradises.
Even the nice stuff has like, you can tell it's like paper thin.
Yeah.
And that actually begins to feel suffocating for a while if you're living there.
Yeah, like the food, you're like, it's plated beautifully and it looks like a Michelin star restaurant, but it tastes like sand. I mean, it's just not that good.
It's got that like it wasn't really made with the highest quality ingredients. It wasn't really made with and that there's just nowhere you can get. And that's the thing, because when we're there, and this is, we'll probably begin to see this in the rest of the world too, is we were, by Peru standards, because we're making a decent salary in the US, we were able to live like very wealthy people, like, fancy restaurant every day, et cetera, right? And even with that, it still felt suffocating after a while.
Yeah. But going back to this thread of giving advice to someone considering coming back, one person, it was great because they were like, it's a great country. Their quote was, or their post was, only problem with South Africa is the theft of taxes and neglect when it comes to maintaining things, as well as the large amount of poor folks left out. They eventually end up doing crime as there is nothing for them to advance in this country. So it's a statistic that you will likely end up being a victim of crime here, as well as suffer with electricity or water issues. Otherwise, it's a great country, in all caps. But like basically what most people were saying, and here's a representative post or a response to their inquiry. It's not too bad, especially if you have the funds to stay in a place with borehole water and backup power. Come and live here. Most people here, meet people here, spend money in small businesses, pay the Uber drivers, enjoy the restaurants and touristy stuff you haven't done. Spend the pounds, because this person can still make money in UK pounds. Our economy benefits of the tourism. Maybe it suits you too. So basically people are just like, yeah, I mean, like just stay in our walled gardens. It's great here. Like everything else is horrible, but like that doesn't affect us. And that's how it's going to be. The people who move off to the walled gardens everywhere in the world as this happens.
But I want to think about, because I think something that people don't think about is how this affects like your daily life if you're living in one of these walled gardens, because it's going to be very different than your daily life today. Which is to say that you're not going to want to just like leave the walled gardens for a restaurant. So today, if you live in Manhattan, you can be like, oh, I want to go to the best whatever restaurant, right? Like I want to go to a Chinese restaurant that fits like my specific palate and that I've been to before. Or I want to go to a nice Italian place or something like that. When you're in the walled gardens, you are generally going to be locked into the restaurant that is in that particular walled garden.
Yeah.
Or the 2 or 3 restaurants there, or the one grocery store in that walled
and
garden.
It's actually quite limited. You really don't have a lot of choices.
Yes. So it dramatically lowers the amount of choice you have in life to be in this environment. It's not like you've actually maintained your true level of wealth. And
you still want to be in the walled garden, though.
No, you still want to be in the walled garden. But I've already noticed how throughout the course of my life, the way you and I relate to consumerism has completely transformed, in part due to a changing global economy, which is to say that early in our relationship, we went to barbers, we went to restaurants, we relied on doctors, we, all of this, like we had a specialist who we would go to for like really,
we went outside the house for pretty much everything. And now we're trying to get more and more from within the house.
And now almost everything we make, I haven't been to a restaurant in maybe a year at this point.
When we travel, we have to eat out.
When we go travel, but I'm talking about like when we're at home. So it is very, very rare for us to go to restaurants. We don't do barbers anymore. We do all our own haircuts. We don't do, even when it comes to fixing things, we typically have like a guy who lives next to us who we hire. Like we do not do as much stuff that integrates us with the wider economy. And this has really transformed our lives.
Well, and also we chose a house with a well water and we don't have a septic system, like a septic pit. So like that is one point of liability. This is something, though, I want to point out, though, the importance of also looking at your infrastructure, like your electricity and your water, and also sort of your security. And I want to go into why this really matters. So we've talked about this. I'm not going to go too deep into it in terms of how cities are not going to be able to maintain their infrastructure as demographic collapse plays out. Malcolm has covered that extensively in other episodes. But the long story short is that when cities start to see lower populations as a product of demographic collapse, as the population declines, that doesn't mean that the cost of maintaining their power grid and their sewer systems goes down in proportion to the number of people. Like they're still the same cost, and it just far fewer taxpayers. So these systems start to crumble, and you saw this happen with cities like Detroit. However, if you live in the United States, especially if you live in a suburban area, this is likely to be much worse, because even with stable and sometimes growing populations in your city, you are likely to still see crumbling infrastructure. And I think that just shows how much this problem is going to be compounded and accelerated in certain areas, which should also factor into your calculations. So where you can learn more about this is from Strong Towns. It's this movement that's been around for over 10 years at this point, but they've been really pointing to the liability of American cities specifically, given how they were developed. Basically, just a really short excerpt from their top sort of warning article and essay about this. They're really against suburbs. They're really more for like more sustainable cities, because the way that suburbs have been built in America is not sustainable. Here's how they put it. Since the end of World War II, our cities and towns have experienced local economic growth using three primary mechanisms. One, transfer payments between governments, where the federal or state government makes a direct investment in growth at the local level, such as funding water system or a sewer system expansion. Two, transportation spending, where transportation infrastructure is used to improve access to a site that can then be developed. Three, public and private sector debt, where cities, developers, companies, and individuals take on debt as part of the development process, whether during construction or through the assumption of a mortgage. In each of these, the local unit of government benefits immediately from all the permit fees, utility charges, and increased tax collection. This is real money that provides for the current budget. Cities also assume the long-term liability for servicing and maintaining all this new infrastructure, a promise that won't come fully due for decades. This exchange, a near-term cash advantage for a long-term financial obligation, is one element of a Ponzi scheme. Over a life cycle, a city frequently receives just a dime or two of revenue for every dollar of liability, a ridiculously low level of financial productivity. So in long story short, cities have been like, yeah, like build the thing. And then they just don't think about how they're going to pay for it over time. And now the bill's coming due. Cities are like, now they need to redo and overhaul their sewer systems or electricity grids. And there's just not the money for it.
Yeah. So the thing with Strong Towns is, I'm going to argue it's kind of a scam system. I've talked about this, and it is a real problem that suburbs development in the United States are going to have to deal with. The problem is that it is an astronomically smaller problem than the problem the cities are dealing with.
True. Yeah, because they're not thinking about demographic collapse. They're only thinking about, like, literally if populations keep growing, this is an issue that needs to be addressed.
If things stay stable.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking about the bureaucratic spiral that cities can get into when we talk about the increased cost of doing little things like, millions of dollars for a porta potty in New York, right? Like this is I think it was 10 million or something, but like this is the real thing that is happening in places like Manhattan and places like San Francisco to the point where it's just not economically sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think we're already seeing, or politically sustainable, because the cities are so ideologically captured, a la Mondani.
Yeah.
And so the cities just like, there's no way you can fix this in the way that they want to fix it. They want to put all these fancy green spaces in cities and make cities look nice and make them more walkable. And it's like, but that doesn't change the roving gangs of criminals that no one is willing to convict. That doesn't change the unsustainable process of like converting luxury hotels into immigrant shelters and stuff like that. And
they haven't. And well, keep in mind, Strong Towns was founded like before this was an issue. So
Right. But I could have predicted that it was going in this direction because I did predict it was going in this direction when I've talked about this before.
yeah.
The suburbs, yes, they're going to have to increase taxes, but suburbs already just don't charge a lot in taxes when contrasted with cities.
Yeah, no, total cities are way more expensive. Though, and I'll get into this in another episode, but yeah, people in suburban areas may pay more taxes than you'd think and more than we ever expected. So just a note, as bills come due, and I think that's one of the reasons why our taxes as people living in a not urban area are still really high. But I want to just circle back to what Johannesburg shows we need to expect. Basically, cities where police may come when called, but don't proactively police. Like, don't expect to be protected where you're going. Don't expect people to actually be prosecuted for crimes. Also, a place where you may need to pay police to actually do their job, or literally just hire private security or investigators or people to solve problems when they arise. You should also expect a future in which maybe, like in Johannesburg, insurance companies fix some infrastructure just to reduce their own costs. But what we're seeing more in the United States is insurance companies just leaving states entirely, like the state of Florida, like the state of California. They're like, nope, I'm not doing it anymore because I will not make money. Because literally, like, these cities are burning and the hurricanes are taking out entire coastal towns. I cannot be solvent and function there. So yeah. I think Johannesburg actually is kind of lucky in that insurance companies are filling in potholes. It's kind of nice. Yeah. Also, I do think it's notable that in Johannesburg, you have homeless people directing traffic where traffic lights are down. We are going to see citizens helping more than you might expect. And I think that's cool. But you want to live in an area, maybe like a Catholic community or an Orthodox Jewish community, where you can actually expect your community to step in where the government fails. Because in very, we'll say a very diverse urban area, like the cities you're talking about, Malcolm, right? People aren't culturally cohesive enough to want to help each other out.
Well,
they're too divided.
Culturally cohesive communities that's in cities, like the ultra
Orthodox. Yeah, like sub communities. But just make sure you know who's gonna watch your back, because in many places there just isn't that sense. Even if people who are like racially, ethnically, culturally homogenous, sometimes you don't get that. Quite often you don't get that. So you just, especially in like a progressive liberal area, people they don't have each other's backs the same way, I find, at least. That's not, I didn't grow up with that sense. And then you also need to just expect more of these walled communities with private security and independent backup water or electricity. And you're already seeing this kind of starting to happen. I mean, there's sort of this wealthy early adopter thing. And what and you can already see in various places is, for example, Mark Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel building their walled gardens and compounds. I'm sending you a picture of architectural renderings of Peter Thiel's New Zealand compound that's sort of built into a hillside, obviously, for nuclear protection or whatever, but it's quite modern and pretty. Mark Zuckerberg's Hawaiian compound, which is called Kalau Ranch or whatever, it features a 5,000 square foot underground shelter connected by two mansions. Connects two mansions with tunnels. There's a blast-proof concrete and metal door. There's an escape hatch. There's living areas. It has its own supplies. So billionaires are early adopters in this, and they're taking it way overboard, but they're trying to sort of build their own little atomized version of a walled garden. But then I would also point to the fact that I'm not going to name anyone, but we know people who are being sort of sponsored by very, very wealthy benefactors to try to create new walled gardens. We were at one point, for example, invited to join a bunch of one of these people who's sort of being sponsored to investigate this, and some of her influential techie friends to spend some time together in this community in, I think, upstate New York, right? Called Chautauqua. I just sent you a bunch of pictures that we took when we were there, which is kind of this Main Street USA, very romantic, very pretty, forgotten, very much walled garden city. Remember the security we had to go through to get in?
Yeah.
It is very fun. You even paid admission fee to get in. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So there are already communities like this that people are now trying to replicate.
Culturally, America is more amenable to this. to the extent that a lot of Americans are already attempting to do this. Like, I think the American sort of settler selection pressures that, especially if you're talking about the Americans whose ancestors went to the West and stuff like that, really selects for, wanting to be cut off from the rest of society.
Yeah. And then we see it in all these different ways that, like, you have the billionaire compounds, you have already existing walled garden communities like Chautauqua. And I want to point out, Chautauqua isn't like this conservative, it's actually like a super NPR liberal barefoot Jew Clinton kind of like beautiful idealistic American, maybe a little bit waspy too, but like it's not a conservative gun-toting militia place. It is where very progressive influential speakers go to speak at an amphitheater. It's very idyllic. Yeah, it's the NPR tote bag of an idyllic walled paradise. But yeah, that also techies are trying to replicate it in their own image, in their own way. But then there's also, of course, the city states. There's the Prosperas. There's the praxis of it all, where people are trying to create these more like sort of tech forward entrepreneurial communities. So it is already happening, and we should just be paying way more attention to where it's happening and how it's happening. And what I want people to really consider carefully is where their families should be set up long-term, logistically. What's the climate like? How much can you get energy and water independence? What's the security situation? How about food security? And how energy, water, and food independent can you get? Because these things are going to increasingly matter. And while these walled gardens work in Johannesburg now, I don't know how long they're going to work, because right now they're basically being funded by sort of inherited wealth, a lot of remote workers, I want people to think about these things. And I hope that talking about Johannesburg and how it's been playing out and how other communities like these are playing out will help people think about it.
Yep. No, I think that looking at the way that developing economies and developing sort of infrastructure is different from a collapsing developed economy.
That's also a really good point. Yeah, a place on the upswing is very different from a place on the downswing.
And places like Lima are going to be on the downswing eventually, right? Like, there's just no getting around it. And this is true across Latin America. Like, Latin America is uniquely effed right now because Latin America got a lot of its business dealing commodities with China. And China is sort of in a state of collapse right now. So the downswing that you're seeing across Latin America is unlikely to abate. And Africa is the same way. Africa did a lot of commodity trading to China. And so these types of countries are only going to get worse. Like, the corruption in Johannesburg is not going to get better unless you, like, I don't know, had some sort of a military coup or something like that, but even that's all too corrupt at this point.
It's all too corrupt. Yeah. I think, the reason why Johannesburg is this early beacon of this walled garden future dystopia is sorry, my laptop is very little battery capacity and I didn't plug it in. The reason why Johannesburg has these walled gardens is because basically, like, the post-apartheid mess that was created and all the corruption has produced a world where it's unfixable. Whereas everywhere else, there's like this plausible fixability. And
well, I think you need sort of dictatorial style, like El Salvador, like leadership to get
that could happen. Yeah.
Fixability in, but I don't think it could happen within Johannesburg unless you went back to like an apartheid like system, but not necessarily an apartheid where whites are on the top. Like, maybe it'll be one tribe is on the top or something like that.
Ooh, Wakanda.
You basically the problem with Johannesburg right now is there's too many factions and none of them really care about any of the other ones.
That is a big problem. There's just like a lot of, I can't remember the specific tribes that like really freaking hate each other.
Yeah, and so they're all sort of pulling from the same pool, and they are just like, well, how do I help mine, right? Because they don't really care that their actions are unsustainable
So
or
apartheid never really ended.
or hurting wider society. Well, no, what I'm saying here is I'm not saying apartheid was good. Nobody clip this and say that I'm saying apartheid was good. But what I'm saying is that if you had just one of the tribes uncontrovertibly at the top of society, then they would understand that if they acted in a corrupt way, they hurt their own tribe the most.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's how you can build a society that works. But because they all are pulling from the same pool, it's almost like, okay, suppose that you have like an investment fund, right? And we have a big pile of money. And that money is supposed to be invested in things that make a return every year, right? However, I am sharing this pool with 100 other people. And any one of those people can come and take money from that pool whenever they want.
It's a classic tragedy of the
Yes.
conversation.
So I'm effed. I'm like, well, then I got to take as much as I can right now because everyone else is taking from it. But now suppose that only my family could take from that pool. Well, now all of a sudden I have a reason to not take from the pool because I want my family to benefit from it, right? And that's the problem that you have in South Africa that you're going to increasingly have because of incredibly loose immigration policies that have caused cultures and groups of people to immigrate to countries where they have no sort of shared identity or belief in a collective outcome.
More tragedies of the commons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So prepare for the end. We love you all.
Yeah, the weird thing. So many people are like, "Are you in different houses?" You know, seeing you walk in at the end of a video.
Proof that we are one, not the same person in drag, just re-recording these episodes, and two, that we are actually in the same house, and that when my laptop dies, I just tiptoe into Malcolm's room.
All right, I love you. I'm glad we got these episodes in.
I love you too.
It was a great episode. Thank you. Simone.
Oh, thank you. Aw.
And now I'm gonna go help Octavian. What are you guys watching?
We're watching a praying mantis. He's trying. Everybody, like and subscribe if you see him.
Where did he go?
He's going over there.
Oh, he's at the
He's
edge.
trying to swim up to it. I think he has a baby. Wait, I think he saw a baby.
Wow, that's a big praying mantis.
I think he just got a baby, dude. Why can't you subscribe if maybe think he got a baby? If you do, then we got like in the squad, Daddy.
Did you know that praying mantises eat their husbands? The mommies eat the daddies in the praying
I can't
mantises.
see him, so why can't I subscribe to the but see?
Okay, go watch it, Octavian, or you'll miss it.
Yeah, we have to. Wait, that's the mommy one.
Yes, that's the mommy one. The daddy ones are smaller in praying mantises.
Because the daddy ones are babies.
No, they're not babies. They're just smaller.
So I can subscribe it. Now I see a little better.
You know how mommy's smaller than daddy?